before we do that, I want to take I rushed it a little bit. We do not want for this to lead yourself to be critical of what has happened in the past. There are things as far as perhaps how you have reared children or how you have not reared them that you can certainly reflect on and perhaps build on and improve on and learn from it. But that is not the main message. Be careful that the devil doesn't take us that way so that we get down in sort of the negativity of life. God builds us up. And so even if we have made mistakes in the past, even if we are sitting here with that void, that's not bad. Don't want you to. That is part of God's plan, or it can be. I believe it is. So the first text that we look at after the theme text, as far as building on how do we train, how do we put children in the right situation so that they never leave, we're going to take a look at 1 Peter 3:15. Because this is talking about relationships, this is talking about how you treat yourself as well as how you treat those you love, how you treat those that you are going to share your message with. But in your hearts, honor Christ the Lord as holy, always being prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you, yet do it with gentleness and respect. And so we respect those who have different beliefs. We respect those who don't have or have a shaky belief, or as we call it, a curiosity. They're very curious. They're very curious. We respect that. In fact, if they ask us about God, one of the first things we might say is, I love to talk to you about that. Why do you ask? To understand what perspective they're coming from, what has perhaps been the hurt, or how something has maybe created doubt in their heart. And then from there you can share even more specifically your story. So one of the things that we want to build on is that a relationship with God gives you a purpose and a hope for life. It tells you that you are loved, and it also tells you that God has a calling for you and wants you to do certain things for His kingdom. It sounds a little churchy, but it is reality. It's life. And there's nothing bad about churchy, except that if it comes across and it's not new and fresh to you, I want to change it. It should be new and fresh. So the emptiness is created because the selfishness of human nature, it has a battle with the God who says there is a correct way, there is a moral way, there is a way of treating people respectfully, there is a way, as our verse says, to do it with gentleness. To do it with gentleness. Now, we are going to be talking, St. Augustine, by the way, was a Luther and Calvin both looked at St. Augustine as a church father that they really respected and they believed. Luther, especially as far as grace is given to us freely. We don't have to do anything with it. Augustine was in the 4th century, as I have said already, and Augustine led this kind of life that you would never believe that he's going to wind up as a church leader. He is the one that said, before he became faithful, he said, "Grant me chastity and continence." To change those to words that we would use now is, grant me a style of living which is honest, and a style of living which is open, and which is not running around at night and getting drunk. It says, "Grant me chastity and continence, but not yet." But not yet. He had a battle. He had a battle. But out of that battle, he developed a relationship with, or I should say, God working through the Spirit, brought that faith, brought that relationship, that he became not only a strong believer, but also became a teacher and a leader. And we're going to talk a little bit about how that happened. The thing that I want to share with you is that when we look at people's lives, those that we already have talked about, and Noah Snyder is one of them, and then certainly, how many of you have heard of Justin Bieber? You admit it? All right. Justin Bieber. Adults, how many of you heard of Justin Bieber? Did I pronounce that name right? I hope I did. Justin Bieber. Yes, you've heard of it, Avery, right? All right. Something I read just yesterday in the newspaper, the Saturday newspaper, talked about faith, and something I didn't know, and that is that Justin Bieber's mother is very young, in her 30s, but Justin Bieber's mother is a Christian, a very devout Christian. And Justin has been brought up in her faith, in her understanding. She talks about it a little bit as that, there's a lot of temptations, and he has to, and I think it is accurate. Each and every one of us have our own relationship that we have to work out with God. It's not, we can't stay with our parents. It's ours. And so that brings issues as far as independency versus dependency. No, mother, I don't want to do that. That brings up issues, or no, Dad, I can't work, no, I just can't do that. And those are not all bad. But what fits in? Train a child in the way that he should walk, and he'll never leave it. Train a child in the way that he should be, and he'll never leave the path. How does it all work? How does it all fit together? I want to go to a passage in 2 Corinthians, which tells us that we do not have to do it alone. Now this is powerful. This gets me back into the Bible. I haven't been in the Bible for a while, and it's something which I'm trying, I'm doing that. But I'll tell you what, look at this. It's a source of strength. Look at this as far as parents, as far as grandparents. Paul says this in 2 Corinthians. We are human, but we don't wage war as humans do. We use God's mighty weapons, not worldly weapons, to knock down the strongholds of human reasoning and to destroy false arguments. We destroy every proud obstacle that keeps people from knowing God. We capture their rebellious thoughts and teach them to obey Christ. As the Spirit leads, as the Spirit moves, as the Spirit is there. Now I'm sure that St. Augustine's mother, who had been praying since he was very young for him to be a Christian, I'm sure she said, during those years, there must have been moments when she said, God, where is your power? Where is your mighty weapons? But she kept praying. St. Augustine, as he was, and he did live a very hedonistic, that means all for himself, life. Very early, he didn't marry. Very early, he had a prostitute. He had a companion, a lover, and he lived with her, actually had a son for many years. And then as that relationship broke up, but also as he became a Christian, he then understood that his life, even though he enjoyed that, even though he said, I want to be chaste, but not now, he said he understood. And part of what had happened was when he was so overwhelmed with his thoughts of evil, his thought of sinfulness, so overwhelmed. What he did is he withdrew to himself, and I want to read a little bit about how it happened. I cast myself down, I don't know not how, under a certain fig tree. By the way, he wrote Confessions, so this is what he was sharing with all the Christians afterwards, including us. I heard a childlike voice singing from a nearby house. I paused to give thought to how and why a child would sing those words, and then left his garden, and then left my garden and returned to the house. And the words were for him to open up and read. Take up and read. Why would a child be saying those words? He couldn't think of any game where that was true, but he then remembered where he had been reading from another theologian, another pastor. He'd been reading, and that pastor had said that at one time he had opened up the book to John, and that is where he received the message that would change his life. And so thinking of this, Augustine went to his room and opened up this verse, which is Romans 13, 13 to 14. And this is what he read. Now remember, he was on his knees, he was praying and confessing his sins. He was simply saying, I can take this no longer, please God forgive me. And his forgiveness came in these words of instruction. Let us behave decently as in the daytime, not in carousing and drunkenness, not in sexual immorality and debauchery, not in dissension and jealousy. Rather, clothe yourself with Lord Jesus and do not think about how to gratify the desires of the flesh. It's pretty straightforward. Bang. Now, Augustine as he grew in his faith, understood that he could not do things perfectly. He understood that he did not have to do things perfectly in order to be saved. He understood that his belief was based upon Jesus Christ as his Savior. And this is where it comes back to us fitting this all together. How do we train? How do we train our children? How do we converse? How do we talk? What activities do we do? What makes a difference? Now, one thing that my wife Kitty and I promised to each other as we were raising our kids, and we were saying that, we were praying, we were attending church, we were doing things which we thought were right, but we saw this as such a challenge. Our kids would get, at least our oldest would get going at church, and we would walk out, and once again he won. And little John was the king of the family at the age of 1.5, and his dad was out there trying to figure out what in the heck was going on. Anyway, we had our battles. We had our battles. Jonathan is our oldest one. And we thought at one time that Jonathan was going to be pretty bad. But we so bad that he would beat up on neighborhood girls. This is age 3. And he's now a pastor. And his wife cannot believe that he had this rambunctious linebacker attitude at one time of his life, but he did. And I'm sure it reflects on his father. And anyway, so one thing that we did promise each other is said, you know, we're going to work hard at this. It was a prayer. We're going to work hard at this. But if something great happens, if everything works out together, we're not going to take any claim for it. It's simply by God's grace. And so I would put that before you. We work hard at it. We do what we can do, but people go in different paths. So you're honoring, and you're loving, and you're being loved by this Jesus Christ that came down, that made our world complete.